Hello.
My stepdaughters told me to never call them my kids, so I stopped calling vendors, transferred all contracts into their mother's name, and left them with their own problems. Don't forget to subscribe and share your experiences below. Let's get started. You're not my real dad. Those 5 words, so simple, so sharp, didn't just come out of my stepdaughter's mouth. They lodged themselves inside my chest like splinters that would never work their way free. I've had my skin torn by jagged steel, had calluses split open from decades of swinging a hammer, but nothing has ever bled me like those words. And they weren't screamed in anger, not tossed in the heat of a tantrum. No, Madison whispered them like a confession, like she was letting me know a secret truth she'd been holding in her back pocket, waiting for the right moment to wound me. She wanted it to land with precision, to strip me down to nothing. It worked. I stood there in the kitchen, holding a plate I just washed, soap sliding down my knuckles, staring at a girl I had driven to school, clothed, fed, and prayed for when she was sick. She didn't flinch. She didn't take it back. "You're not my real dad." Her sister, Kylie, sat at the table. She didn't say it out loud, but her silence was its own confirmation. The smirk tugging at the corner of her mouth told me she agreed. Together, they had spoken the truth they wanted me to swallow, that I was an outsider in my own home. That was the night I understood something that had taken me too long to see. The hardest breaks don't happen in a house, they happen in a family. And betrayal never comes from strangers. Strangers can hurt you, yes, but they don't gut you. No, real betrayal comes from the people you pour your time and soul into, the ones you defend, the ones you bleed for. My name is Daniel. I'm 43 years old, and I've spent the better part of my life on construction sites. Concrete, steel, sweat. Those are the languages I speak best. My job is fixing what's broken, bringing order where there's chaos. When I build something, it stands. When I repair something, it holds. But there are fractures no hammer can mend, no level can straighten, no blueprint can solve. Families don't come with schematics. Hearts don't follow measurements. I met Carol 4 years ago. She wasn't just another woman. I need you to understand that. She was strength wrapped in a smile. She'd raised 2 daughters almost single-handedly after her divorce, working long shifts at the hospital and still finding time to show up at school events, to bake birthday cakes, to push through every storm that had come her way. I met her at a school fair of all places. It was a chilly evening in October, the kind where your breath fogs in the air and kids run wild with paper cups of hot chocolate. I was there volunteering, hammering together a booth someone had left half-finished, when Carol walked up to me with her daughters in tow. Madison and Kylie were quiet then, polite even. Madison clutched a book to her chest, eyes darting anywhere but at me, while Kylie held onto her mother's sleeve like a shadow. There was no hostility in them, not then. Just distance. And I thought, good. Distance I can work with. Distance can be closed with time. With Carol, everything moved naturally. Coffee after the fair turned into dinners. Dinners turned into weekends together. Weekends blurred into months. And before long, I found myself standing in her kitchen, cooking breakfast for her girls as if it had always been my role. I won't lie, I thought I was building something real. I thought the silence of those girls would one day break into trust, maybe even affection. I imagined that if I kept showing up, if I kept putting in the hours, they'd see me for who I was, the man who chose them, not the man who left them. Because their father, Alex, he had left. He was a ghost, a shadow that drifted in and out when it suited him. A man who could disappear for weeks, months even, and then resurface with gifts in hand, playing the hero. The kind of father who thought fun was a currency that could replace responsibility. He was the yes man, the one who showed up with water park tickets, with midnight pizzas, with stories that made him sound larger than life. He wasn't the one driving them to appointments, talking to teachers, or sitting through parent conferences. He was the one who left me to do the heavy lifting while he got to bask in the spotlight. And I let him, because in my mind, what mattered was not competing with him but outlasting him. I thought if I kept showing up, if I kept doing the work, the truth would become undeniable. I thought one day Madison and Kylie would look at me and say, he stayed. He built this life. He is our Father in every way that matters. That's the hope that carried me. That's the lie that nearly destroyed me. It started with small things. Eye rolls, sighs when I spoke, little muttered comments they didn't think I heard. Then came the mockery. They'd mimic my voice when I gave directions. They'd joke to their friends that I was trying too hard. They'd compare me to Alex, holding up his rare visits like trophies. And Carol? She stayed silent. Sometimes she'd try to smooth it over, tell me teenagers are difficult, that it wasn't personal. But silence is complicity. Every time she let those words hang in the air without correction, she gave them permission to dig deeper. The betrayal didn't come all at once. It came drip by drip, until the flood finally broke. That night in the kitchen, with soap still sliding down my fingers and Madison's eyes drilling into me, the dam shattered. "You're not our dad," Madison said. Kylie's smirk confirmed it. It wasn't just a statement. It was a verdict. And in that moment, I felt every nail I'd driven, every roof I'd raised, every hour I'd given to that family crumble into dust. Because what they had told me wasn't just that I wasn't their father. They told me that nothing I had built for them mattered. Alex, even the name feels like a weight pressing against my chest. He wasn't just their father, he was their idol. A man who had walked away from responsibility, yet somehow managed to remain untouchable in their eyes. He was the kind of father who lived in fragments, a shadow that appeared at random, always carrying something bright enough to distract from the emptiness he left behind. Tickets to a concert, a shopping spree, a car ride filled with fast food and music turned too loud. He didn't need to enforce rules, didn't need to say no, didn't need to worry about bills. He lived as a guest in their lives, never a resident, and in that fleeting presence, he managed to buy the very thing I had been trying to earn with years of sacrifice: affection. When he arrived, the air changed. Madison's voice became sharper, filled with laughter that didn't exist when she was with me. Kylie's eyes, usually cold, would light up. They would hang on his words, as though he were a prophet speaking truths from some higher mountain. And me? I became invisible. I remember one summer weekend when he decided to swoop in. Carol had been exhausted from her shifts, so I had planned a quiet Saturday for the family. A trip to the lake, sandwiches packed, fishing poles ready. The kind of day where peace might slip in between the cracks of our strained bonds. But then Alex pulled up in his glossy truck, horn blaring, music shaking the glass. The girls ran out the door before I could even finish loading the cooler. I stood there, watching them climb into his passenger seat without a word, without a glance back. "Change of plans," Carol said, her voice soft, apologetic, as if she were trying to shield me from the sting. Change of plans. I stayed home that day, alone with the cooler and the fishing poles. They came back that night buzzing with stories, water parks, shopping, a movie after. My plans, my effort, my role. All erased with the flash of Alex's smile and the swipe of his credit card. That was when I first realized he wasn't just a ghost. He was poison. Because what I didn't know then, but would come to learn, was that Alex wasn't simply visiting. He was working behind the scenes, twisting the narrative. While I was enforcing curfews, insisting on homework, paying the bills, he was whispering in their ears, "You don't have to listen to him. He's not your real dad." Those words, spoken by him, repeated by them, became a wedge driven deeper each day. First, it was small. An eye roll when I told Madison to finish her homework. A groan when I asked Kylie to put away her laundry. Carol would brush it off. "They're teenagers, Daniel. They test boundaries. It's normal." But normal doesn't cut this deep. One evening, I asked Kylie to put her phone down at the dinner table. She didn't look at me. She turned to her mother and said, "Do I have to?" Carol hesitated, then repeated my words as if they weren't valid until they passed through her mouth. Only then did Kylie set the phone down, glaring at me like I had overstepped. It was a ritual repeated again and again. My words held no weight until Carol echoed them. And the girls learned fast. If they ignored me long enough, their mother would step in, soften the command, make me redundant. That's how you erase a man. Not with absence, but with silence. The real fracture came during arguments. If I grounded Madison for failing a class, Alex would swoop in the next week with gifts, undermining the consequence. If I refused to buy Kylie something frivolous, Alex would appear and hand it to her, whispering that she deserved better than me. Each time, the girls pulled further away. Each time, Carol stood back, unwilling to confront the truth, that their father was sabotaging the very structure I was trying to build. I swallowed it down. I told myself patience would win. I told myself kids grow up, that one day they would look back and see who had really been there. But deep down, I was rotting. The tipping point came during a family dinner. The air was heavy with the smell of roasted chicken, the kind of meal I had rushed home from work to cook. Madison sat across from me, scrolling on her phone. Kylie slouched in her chair, pushing peas around her plate. "Girls," I said, steady but firm, "put the phones away, sit up, show some respect at the table." Madison didn't look up. Kylie smirked, and then, as if rehearsed, Madison said it. "You need to know your place." The fork slipped from my hand and clattered against the plate. "My place?" Kylie chimed in, her voice sharp with mockery. "Yeah, you're not our dad." I sat there, frozen, staring at the two daughters I had driven to practices, paid medical bills for, spoken to teachers about. The two daughters I had defended in arguments, who I had stayed awake for when they were sick, who I had tried, God help me, tried to love as my own. And then Madison delivered the final cut. Her eyes locked on mine, cold, unflinching. "Don't ever call us your kids." The room went silent. Carol opened her mouth, but no words came. She looked down at her plate, as though the chicken, the peas, the cracks in the wood table were more important than the line that had just been drawn across the room. That was the moment everything collapsed. Not just their words, but her silence. Her silence told me the truth, that no matter what I had built, no matter how many years I had given, I would never stand on the same ground as Alex. That she would rather keep the peace with her daughters than defend the man who had been keeping the roof over their heads. That was the night I realized respect wasn't slipping. It was gone. And without respect, everything else was meaningless. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't slam my fists against the table or storm out the door. No, my revenge was quieter than that. Colder. That night, after the girls spat their final verdict, "Don't ever call us your kids," I sat in the living room long after they'd retreated upstairs. Carol hovered in the kitchen, washing dishes that didn't need washing, pretending not to see me staring into nothing. She wanted the silence to pass, wanted the moment to dissolve like sugar in tea. But this wasn't dissolving. This was hardening. I had carried their lives for years. I was the one who kept the gears turning. Teachers called me, doctors called me, coaches emailed me. I was the one who signed every permission slip, scheduled every appointment, renewed every phone plan, argued with insurance agents, negotiated every car repair. I had made myself the invisible scaffolding that held their world upright. But scaffolding can be removed. And when it is, the structure either stands on its own or collapses. That night, I made my choice. The next morning, before work, I opened the laptop at the dining table. Folder after folder of bills, accounts, logins stared back at me. I didn't rage-click. I didn't curse. My hands were steady as I stripped my name away from their lives, one account at a time. Cell phone contracts transferred into Carol's name. Car insurance moved out of my account. Sports fees canceled. Automatic tuition payments stopped. Doctor's bills redirected to Carol's email. Every number, every responsibility, every invisible rope that tied me to them, I cut. By the time the sun rose high enough to spill light through the blinds, I was lighter. Empty, yes, but free. I didn't announce it. I didn't need to. I wanted them to discover the void, to feel the absence of the man they had dismissed. The first cracks appeared within days. Madison missed her soccer practice because the monthly activity fee hadn't been paid. Her coach emailed Carol instead of me, asking why she hadn't responded. Carol, of course, hadn't even realized she was supposed to. Madison stormed through the house that evening, shouting about humiliation, about how unfair it was. T glares at me as though I had betrayed her. I didn't answer. Then Kylie's phone went dark. The contract had been in my name for years, the bills automatically drafted from my account. Now, with the renewal ignored, her service shut off. I watched her sit at the kitchen table, red-faced, pounding the screen like it was a personal betrayal. "Mom, why isn't my phone working?" Carol stammered, fumbling through her purse for overdue notices she hadn't read. And me? I sat there with my coffee, flipping through the newspaper like their chaos was background noise. One by one, the dominoes fell. Late fees stacked on the kitchen counter. The car insurance lapsed. Suddenly Madison couldn't drive without breaking the law. Kylie missed a doctor's appointment because the forms had been sent to Carol, who forgot to sign them. Teachers began calling the house, leaving messages that went unanswered. The order I had built, the quiet system of invisible labor, crumbled. And only then did they see it. Only then did they realize that their lives had been resting not on Alex, not even on Carol, but on me. The first confrontation came a week later. Madison cornered me in the hallway, arms crossed, eyes burning with indignation. "Why didn't you pay for my soccer fees?" she snapped. I looked at her, calm as stone. "Because I'm not your dad, remember?" Her lips parted, but no sound came. She turned on her heel and slammed her bedroom door hard enough to rattle the frames on the wall. 2 nights later, Kylie tried. Her voice wavered, half anger, half confusion. "You could have fixed my phone. You always do." I leaned against the counter, steady. "Not anymore. That's your mother's responsibility." The silence that followed was heavier than her words. But it wasn't just the girls who cracked under the weight, it was Carol too. One evening, she sat at the dining table, bills spread in front of her like a battlefield. Her hair was pulled back, her hands trembling as she tried to make sense of the numbers. I stood in the doorway, watching her realize how much I had carried. "Daniel," she whispered, not looking up, "this is too much. You can't do it all." "You don't have to," I replied. "Alex can help. He's their father." The words stung her. She knew the truth as well as I did. Alex wouldn't help. He never had. But she couldn't argue. She couldn't deny the proof sitting in front of her in red ink and overdue stamps. The girls noticed too. Slowly, their anger shifted. The silence at dinner grew heavier, not defiant anymore, but uncertain. They were starting to see the gap between the father they praised and the stepfather they had rejected. But I didn't give them speeches. I didn't offer comfort. I wanted them to sit in it, to feel the difference between my presence and my absence. Carol tried to bridge the gap. She begged me one night, her voice shaking, "They're just kids. Don't punish them like this. They don't understand." I turned to her, my words sharp but quiet. "No, Carol. They understand perfectly. They know how to wound. They knew what they were saying when they told me I wasn't their father. I'm just listening now." She didn't reply. She didn't have to. The consequences were writing themselves across their lives, louder than any argument I could make. And for the first time, I felt something close to peace. Not happiness, not vindication, but peace. Because I wasn't breaking myself against the same wall anymore. I wasn't pouring my labor into a void. I was finally letting them live in the truth they had declared. If I wasn't their father, then I wouldn't play the part. And the silence that followed was louder than any scream. The silence lasted longer than I expected. After I cut the ties, after the bills began to rot on the counter and the phones went dark, I thought the girls would come storming back immediately, shouting, demanding. But for weeks, all I heard were slammed doors, whispered complaints upstairs, and Carol's tired sighs echoing through the house. They weren't ready to bend. Pride kept them afloat, even as the world beneath them cracked. But pride is a fragile foundation. Eventually, it collapses. The first break came with Madison. One evening, she appeared in the doorway of the garage where I was fixing a broken drill. She lingered, shifting her weight from one foot to the other, her voice low, stripped of its usual venom. "Coach said I can't play anymore unless the fees are paid." I kept my hands steady on the drill, not looking up. "That's between you, your mother, and your father." She didn't argue. She didn't throw her usual barbs. For the first time, she looked small, like a child realizing the safety net had vanished. She left without another word, but the silence she carried with her was different. Not defiance, not anger, but doubt. A few days later, Kylie cracked. Her phone had been useless for weeks, and I caught her borrowing Carol's in the kitchen, whispering to a friend with embarrassment in her tone. When she noticed me, she froze, then hung up. "Why can't you just fix it?" she asked, her voice almost breaking. I wiped my hands on a rag and looked her straight in the eye. "Because I'm not your dad, remember?" Her lips trembled. She didn't respond. She just lowered her eyes and walked away. Piece by piece, the reality settled into them. Their fun dad wasn't stepping up. Alex's gifts had stopped at the door. His promises had no weight. The midnight pizzas and trips to the mall couldn't replace the structure of a home, the invisible web of responsibilities that had kept their lives seamless. Without me, everything was unraveling, and they knew it. The turning point came one night at dinner. Carol had cooked pasta, but the air was heavy, no one speaking. Madison pushed her food around the plate. Kylie sat with her arms folded, glancing at me, then back at her fork. Finally, Madison cleared her throat. We didn't mean it." Her voice was flat, hesitant, but the words hung in the air like fragile glass. Kylie nodded quickly, as if agreeing would lessen the weight. "Yeah, we were mad. We didn't mean it." I set my fork down and leaned back, letting the silence draw out until they shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. "You meant it," I said finally, my voice low, and I listened. They stared at me, eyes wide, not sure how to respond. Carol looked down, her hands clenched in her lap. She didn't defend them, not this time. For once, the silence was hers too. Madison spoke again, her voice cracking. "But we didn't know. We didn't realize how much you did." I leaned forward, meeting both of their eyes in turn. "That's the problem. You didn't want to realize. You wanted the easy version of family, the gifts, the weekends, the father who shows up just long enough to make you laugh. You didn't respect the one who was here every day. And when I asked for the smallest thing, respect, you spat in my face." Kylie's eyes welled up, but she held them back. Madison swallowed hard. Carol finally spoke then, her voice soft but weighted with years of avoidance. "Daniel's right. I should have said something a long time ago. I let it go because I didn't want fights in the house. But that silence hurt him, and it hurt this family." The girls stared at her, stunned. For the first time, their mother wasn't shielding them, wasn't smoothing the edges. She was putting the blame where it belonged. And in that moment, the balance shifted. I straightened in my chair. My voice was steady, deliberate, each word chosen like stone laid in mortar. "I'll tell you this once. Respect isn't a gift you hand out when you feel like it. It's a requirement. If I'm in this family, then I will be treated as part of it. I am not here to be a convenient sponsor, a wallet, or a man you acknowledge only when it suits you. If you want my presence, my help, my care, it comes with one condition: respect. Every day. Without it, you have nothing from me." The silence that followed was thick, pressing against the walls. Madison looked down at her plate, shoulders hunched. Kylie blinked hard, her bravado gone. Carol nodded slowly, her eyes glassy but firm. It wasn't a grand apology. It wasn't tears or hugs. It was quieter than that, but heavier. For the first time, they understood. The days that followed were different. Madison picked up her plate without being asked. Kylie began to say thank you for small things, hesitant at first, but real. Carol, too, began to step in, not to undermine me, but to back me. When I spoke, she reinforced, not replaced. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't healing overnight. But the poison that Alex had planted began to lose its grip. One Saturday morning, I heard Madison on the phone with a friend. Her voice carried through the hallway. "No, Alex doesn't pay for that stuff. Daniel does. He's the one who keeps everything running." For the first time in years, the truth had been spoken aloud. Did it erase the wounds? No. Did it make me whole again? No. Words don't undo scars. But it was a beginning, and beginnings, even bitter ones, are stronger than silence. That night, I stood on the porch, watching the last light fade across the street. Carol came out, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. "They'll come around," she whispered. I didn't answer right away. I stared at the horizon, where the dark meets the fading glow, the place where endings blur into beginnings. Finally, I said, "Maybe, but they'll only stay around if they understand one thing: respect is the price of this family. And I won't bargain it anymore." She nodded, tears glinting in her eyes. She didn't argue. She didn't plead. She just stood beside me in silence. And in that silence, for the first time in years, I felt something that almost resembled peace. Now tell me, was I wrong? Was I cruel for demanding respect before love? For cutting the strings that bound me to a family that spat on my role? Or was this the only way to remind them that love without respect is nothing but slavery? You decide.
Bye bye.